CEO and co-founder. It is Monday morning. It is looking like a great week, and we are heading right down to the University of Virginia. Jennifer Lawless, she's the chair of the Political Science Department. Professor, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm happy to.
Happy graduation, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is a towering institution. I saw the photo of you and some of your colleagues. They were a tad, what was it, the Ralph Sampson alumni group getting together?
Yeah, I'm a little shorter than the average person in the department, it turns out.
All right, let's go right to it. The president, Joe Biden, has returned from the G7 conference and is supposed to be meeting with the Speaker of the House today on raising the debt ceiling and maybe some budget negotiations. Where are we with this issue, and are we going to find a resolution in the near future?
We're basically nowhere. Every time it seems that there's a step forward and the Biden administration announces that there was a good meeting or there was some degree of progress made or at least a good conversation, McCarthy and his team backtrack and say, no, we've basically gotten nowhere. So it seems that McCarthy doesn't know exactly what he's authorized to agree to or give, and he has to keep coming back and talking to the conference. And that just doesn't bode well for any sort of negotiation. The other thing that seems to be a problem is that Biden appears willing to make some concessions regarding the federal budget moving forward, but not about whether we'll pay our bills and raise the debt ceiling now. And that's not a game that McCarthy's interested in playing. So at this point, it seems like it's a game of chicken, and we're just going to keep moving along in this direction.
Did the president make a mistake in going to the G7 instead of working over the weekend with the speaker?
I don't think so. The fact that Zelensky was there, the fact that there was so much of an emphasis on the war in Ukraine and how to handle Russia and Russian aggression, it would have been incredibly, I think, short-sighted for the president not to have attended those meetings. He did leave early. He made it very, very clear that he's trying to walk and chew gum. But I think that attending and leaving a little bit early was probably the right move.
Okay, let's check that off. Tim Scott, senator, is going to announce for president today, reportedly. What does that do to the mix of Republican candidates, and what does a prominent senator who's black add to the race and the discussion in our country?
Well, it seems to me that there are two important dynamics at play here. The first is that the Republican primary field is going to look more diverse than it traditionally looks in terms of top-tier candidates. Now, this is not the first time we've seen a woman. Carly Fiorina ran, Elizabeth Dole ran, so Nikki Haley is not the only one. We also know Herman Cain and Ben Carson ran in the past, but Tim Scott is a very well-respected current U.S. senator. And so we've now got the two senators from South Carolina entering the race and highlighting that this is not only a white men's club. The second thing that I think is important here is my understanding is that Senator John Thune from South Dakota is actually going to endorse Tim Scott today.
Wow.
And what that means, is that not true?
No, I said wow.
No. And what that means is that this is a race where Senate endorsements are actually up for grabs, and they're not all going to go to Donald Trump. That's good news for Ron DeSantis. It's good news for Nikki Haley. But obviously, with somebody in the Senate leadership endorsing Tim Scott, it's excellent news for him today.
Yeah, listen, I think it shakes things up dramatically. It changes the whole dynamics of the race. And if he can raise money, you never know. I mean, these races have many twists and turns, especially at this early stage and where we end up. I mean, Donald Trump faces numerous legal challenges across the board. He may or may not be there by the time the race comes around or even the primaries come around. So very, very interesting.
The other thing I would note to that is remember that when we look back at both 2012 and 2016, there was this whack-a-mole component where, the person who was in the lead in 2012, it was Mitt Romney. In 2016, it was Donald Trump. Were constantly competing against this second choice candidate. And so, and those candidates kept moving around. The more of them that there are, the more Donald Trump has to stay on his toes, and he's going to have to fight a war on multiple fronts.
So I'm perplexed at Ron DeSantis's strategy. Here I am, arguably from a business standpoint, a pillar issue for Republicans. From a business standpoint, I'm one of the most successful governors in the country. Secondly, I've got this data point that more people move per capita to Florida than any other state in the country, sort of a secondary endorsement of what his policies are. And he's getting caught up in all these social issue battles and then fighting with Mickey Mouse. I mean, you know, he looks like the hunter in Bambi. What is the strategy going on with Ron DeSantis?
Well, I think the points that you raised are generally helpful in a general election, but it's clear that this Republican primary is all about the culture war and how far to the right any of these candidates can move. It's about banning books. It's about ensuring that women have no reproductive rights after the 6th week of pregnancy. It's about making sure that transgender children and adults feel uncomfortable navigating the world. I mean, this is, you know, insert your candidate here, and this person is moving further and further away from notions of democratic rights. And so having a solid business background, being a governor who won statewide and scooping up significant chunks of the Democratic vote in Democratic strongholds doesn't help you among that Republican electorate.
And is Florida now, which was always sort of a bluish purple state, then it became a purple state, is it now a red state?
I think so. I mean, it's been a long time now, and all of the trends are. It's not only at the presidential level. We've seen Democrats get knocked off in congressional districts. We've seen mayors get knocked off in blue cities, and it seems that the state is in the red column. Now, that's not to suggest that it's not one of these states that could sort of move back to purple during the right campaign with the right candidate. But if I had to guess right now, I would say that it's a Republican state.
While we're discussing debt ceiling, it does not appear we're discussing anything else. Is Congress at a standstill?
Well, I think they're also discussing George Santos and how to pass the buck, right? Like that seems to be something that's going on in the House of Representatives at the same time. But yeah, in terms of policy, absolutely. And I think it's in some ways understandable if the debt limit is not raised, if the debt ceiling is not raised and the United States defaults, the economic implications trickle down to literally every single policy, because the extent to which the global community is able to deal with us, begins to fray at the edges. And so I understand the singular focus. That said, given that that's the only main focus, it's a little hard to understand why there's been no movement.
Let's jump over. You mentioned George Santos. I'm going to mention Barbara Feinstein. Barbara Feinstein appears to be lacking cognitive skills based on a number of interviews that have been done with her in the hallways. She doesn't know what illnesses she's had. She seems easily confused. She said she had a cold or the flu, and in fact, she had encephalitis. Is this turning into a major embarrassment for the Democratic Party, and is it time for her to step down?
Look, Dianne Feinstein was a beacon of sort of the future. When she became mayor of San Francisco, when she was then elected to the United States Senate, she was this incredibly powerful woman who basically changed the face of politics. When she and Barbara Boxer ran for the Senate in 1992, they were both up, and their slogan was 2% is okay for milk, but it's not okay for the U.S. Senate, because there have only been 2 women in the Senate at the time. But we have seen a situation in which, she has deteriorated both cognitively and physically. And, I don't think it's up to any one person or the leadership to, demand that she resign. But it is hard to see how she's able to do her job. The one thing I will note here is that there's generally been quite a bit of deference to senators when it comes to making decisions about whether it's time to leave. And it's not to say that it's a good thing, but Strom Thurmond, Robert Byrd, they were both in the Senate long after they should not have been there. And the calls for them to step down don't seem to be as loud as they are for Feinstein. So I think it's important for everybody to step back and, assess maybe the reasons why we're treating her this way.
Yeah, I'm going to push back a little bit. I don't remember, I may be wrong, that either or both of them had long absences of 3 to 4 months. Secondly,
but even if you're not absent, if you're there and basically not able to function, I'm not sure that you're really present. Now, I will say that because of the total number of days that she was out and the fact that the Judiciary Committee was at a standstill and then unable to confirm judges, I mean, that's a little bit different than just missing some votes. And so, a possibility is that she has to be removed from the Judiciary Committee. There are alternatives around, how to deal with this in a way that doesn't necessarily lead to, 99 other people calling for her to leave.
But isn't that the point, that Democrats had many opportunities to be able to switch that out during the course of the past 4 to 5 months? They chose not to. Now it's becoming a huge public embarrassment, and it's really destroying her legacy. It is clear in these interviews that she's not capable of communicating what her situation is, and the idea of her going in to just vote aye for a few minutes, then she has to go and recover and come back. I mean, it's an embarrassment to the Senate.
Well, I don't know if it's an embarrassment to the Senate. I think just, on a personal level, I think that people should look at this and have incredible empathy for her, given her age, given what she's been through. It just seems like not a way that you would want to spend your time at this point in your life, right? You're almost 90 years old, you're sick, and you're unable to do the job well. Like, what's the reason for holding on? But again, I would leave that to the voters of California to decide.
Let's go to George Santos. He's in the process of being expelled from the House. He's
Maybe.
under federal indictment. Is the clock on the field?
I think that the Republicans hope so. And, if all goes well, they're going to be able to get rid of him without actually calling to get rid of him, which is having their cake and eating it too. They've referred this to the Ethics Committee so that they haven't had to make a strict call themselves. A couple of Republican members have said that, there should be a call for him to resign, or if not, and if he's not willing to do it, then he should be expelled. But that's not going to be something that goes to a floor vote anytime soon. He, in the meantime, has appointed himself treasurer of his reelection campaign. So he doesn't seem to be going anywhere right now. We'll see what happens. The timing of these things is obviously slow. I think he's not going to be back, in a courtroom for quite some time.
Let's come up here to the first congressional race. GoLocal had a story last week about Councilman John Goncalves, one of the candidates for the first congressional district. He seems to be somewhat confused, maybe about his education lineage. When he was running for city council, he was a Providence school product. He came out of Vartan Gregorian Elementary School and claimed he was an alumni in some places. He graduated from Providence Public Schools. Only problem with that, it wasn't true. Now that he's running for Congress and trying to attract voters maybe from a broader standpoint and maybe in some affluent communities, he's a graduate of Wheeler School, which is actually where he graduated from high school. These, we talked about a little bit with Sabina Matos and sort of what's the number of people endorsing her. Why these errors? And in the case of John Goncalves, that we've uncovered situations in which there's been plagiarism in some of his writings. What's the problem here?
First, I think that it's important to differentiate. I think the Matos campaign made a very silly mistake in releasing the wrong number. My bet is that they had a list of people who had said that they would endorse and they hadn't gone through and confirmed all of them, and they released the wrong number, and that's sloppy, and it speaks to potential sloppiness in a broader level that could ultimately damn a campaign. But it's not lying about her specific background. Now, it's still bad, but to say that you graduated from one school when you graduated from another, to plagiarize, to engage in explicit behavior of your own, that cannot be attributed to a clerical error, even if it's not, I think speaks to the fact that this is not somebody that should be sent to Washington. There are too many people in Washington who already fit that bill. And it stuns me that in an era where we're seeing the George Santos unraveling, and we're seeing sort of what this means for democracy and what this means for the disregard with which people hold their elected officials, that you'd have a candidate, basically do it again.
Yeah, it's remarkable, and he seems to play the victim card on these things, that GoLocal's being mean to him. No, GoLocal's just doing some journalism and digging into all the candidates' claimed backgrounds and what their experiences are, and when we find them, we're going to disclose them. Professor.
Look, when you run for Congress, when you run for any office, but especially if you're running for federal office, my advice to people is don't lie. People find out. If the media are doing their job, they will find out. Voters will find out. And if you can't put yourself forward as who you actually are and think that you can win an election that way, then you have no business being an elected official.
It would seem to make sense. It would not seem to be an extraordinary bar that you have to point out to members, candidates for congressional office.
Yeah, here we
don't
are.
lie. Yeah, don't intentionally lie and mislead people. What should we be looking for over the next couple of weeks? Is it all debt crisis? Is that the only thing that we're going to be talking about?
So in terms of legislation and Congress, I think, yes, it's basically the debt crisis. And it's going to, I think, be a discussion not only about the debt ceiling, but also broader federal budget negotiations moving forward. And in particular, the idea that some of the entitlement programs that people are accustomed to and benefits that they've been promised could now potentially be linked to various work requirements or other requirements to earn those, to get those benefits, to receive those benefits. It's not going to go over well with the Democrats. It's already not going over well with the Democrats, but it looks like Biden might be willing to have some kinds of conversations about those topics. So, we'll see. The other thing that I would note is that we're now at the point where my sense is that in the next week or so, Ron DeSantis will formally declare his candidacy. And once he announces his campaign, I don't think he can be as publicly silent about taking on Donald Trump as he's been. Now, we've heard him say things either off the record or in small gatherings about why he's a better candidate and why Trump is not a good bet. But I think over the course of the next couple of weeks, the gloves will really come off.
Jennifer Lawless, Chair of the Political Science Department at the University of Virginia, as always, thank you very much. We'll have a lot more today, up and down the hour with updates. Stay tuned for much, much more. Enjoy this great weather and stay